So with those upright supports in place, the last thing I'm going to do is take that last chunk of ash I have from that big piece and rip it in half. And then I'm going to lap joint that piece as well as the uprights to give me my structure for the back. To lay out those cross braces, I laid this bench on its back so it's easier to lay it out. You're not fighting with gravity. And the top one, I'm going to want all the way at the top. And the other one, I put as close to the bottom as I felt was safe. I didn't want to get too close to that tenon because there's a lot of lumber removed from this piece of wood, and you don't want it to be too far down where you take a huge chunk out. So once I had these lined up, I put marks there, and then on either side of these pieces, and then I went and put marks on the undersides because you're going to be cutting into the top of this but into the bottom of this for your lap joints. Then, since there's going to be a decorative element on the inside of this piece, to make life easier, I didn't measure from the bench up because the bench is uneven, and instead I measured from the top piece down to get my spacing. The spacing on either side is going to be 10.5. So now I could take this apart and cut those 4 laps into these pieces. So halfway through this piece of lumber is about 7/8. So I lowered my blade to 7/8 and I transferred my marks from the bottom onto the sides. So now I could start running through and cutting these lap joints. Now that I'm cutting the laps on my back supports, I'm keeping the blade at 7/8 because even though this is thicker lumber and it's not going to go halfway through to make a flush lap, I want those 2 stretchers to be a little bit proud of the front of the back. So I'm keeping it at 7/8 so that those stretchers will stick out ever so much on the top. With my laps in place, I'm not really gluing anything together yet. And that's because I'm going to need to access the underside of this to attach the insert that's going in here. But everything's square. My corners are all square and these 2 distances match, which is super important. So what I did is there's going to be 3 X's that go in the center of this. And since my mortise and tens and my lap joints are structural enough, those are just going to be inset and then attached from the top and bottom with dowels to keep them in place. So what I did was, since there's 3 of them, I split this into thirds. The width of this was 41 3/8, which actually worked out to be a perfect 13 3/4 for each segment. So now that I have that 13 3/4, I can measure my diagonals and start making the cuts for my X's. So the legs and the bulk of the back are made out of that ash, and the C and the X's are going to be made out of the same material, which is these old timbers from beams and houses. And this is older pine. So what I'm going to do is I want to keep the character of the rough sawn lumber on the top, so that's what you see on the bench. So I'm going to rip this into 2-inch pieces, get 2 pieces, and then rip those in half this way so I'll have a front and a back that's rough sawn. After cutting this first piece, I dry fit it in all of the 3 compartments, and since I made sure to cut those laps square, everything's square, and this one size will work for all the X's. So now I'm just going to go and cut 5 more of these, and once those are cut, I'm going to cut laps so they could join together. That's what it looks like with the X's in place. And I was lucky on this. A lot of times it's hard to get reclaimed lumber super square, but that inner rectangle ended up being square, so I was able to make one hash mark for the X and then just copy it for all the other ones, as well as copy the lap joints once I had them marked out, which made life so much easier. So this is going to be ready. The back's going to be ready to be glued all together, the 2 uprights into the mortises, and then the lap joints are all going to be glued in place, and then dowels are going to go through them, as well as dowels are going to go through the X's. I'm going to take that off and sand the base completely to finish before I do that. Originally, I was going to attach these X's to these 2 cross members using dowels drilled into the top and bottom. But now that it's together and I'm ready to start gluing on the final pieces, I think it's going to be easier to cut a dado in the center of both of these pieces, and then as well in the bottom of the legs of these X's, and put 2 splines in here and have those attached that way. So I'm actually going to take this apart and cut those dados into these 2 pieces. So I've got my dado stack in there, and I ended up just using this piece of scrap poplar. It's 3/4 inch wide, so I'll do 3/8 of an inch into each piece, and it's about 5/16 inch thick. So I put my dado stack in for 5/16 of an inch, and then for my pieces, I'm going to cut them right down the middle, and I'm just going to, I don't want to cut the ends obviously, so past those laps, I'm just going to kind of drop this on there and slide it to the other side and do both of those like that. Now I can cut that same groove on the bottom tips of my X's. So I moved my fence over a little bit because this material is a little bit thinner than the cross braces, and I want it down the center, and now I could send it through and have something for that groove to go on the other side. Now before I'm sending these through, I glued the laps, and then I also countersunk a screw and put a screw in there so this can't move around on me when it's on a table saw, but also because there's going to be a dowel in here in the end, so I could put a screw in there, and then once this dries, take that screw out and then replace it with a dowel. So this screw kind of acts like a clamp while that glue is drying.